When Aang stepped out of his vehicle, a girl suddenly appeared, aiming her gun directly at him. She demanded to know which hunting team he belonged to. Calmly, Aang replied that he wasn't part of any hunting team, he was merely a human warrior passing through the area. However, the girl remained suspicious, convinced that no warrior from the city would dare come to a place like this alone. She accused Aang of being a scout for the Silver Wolf hunting team. Aang firmly denied it, explaining that he wasn't affiliated with them, though he admitted it would be difficult to make her understand. Unconvinced, the girl fired a warning shot at the ground near Aang's feet. With a harsh voice, she ordered him to shut up and demanded to know if any members of her branded gun's hunting team were still alive. Aang answered that there was no way he could prove his innocence right now, and warned that pointing a gun at strangers wouldn't get her the answers she was seeking. As the girl hesitated and began to lower her weapon, Aang noticed more figures approaching from behind. Sensing his change in expression, the girl quickly raised her gun at him again. But before she could act, multiple bullets struck her arms, forcing her to drop her weapon. Aang turned and saw several men from the Silver Wolf hunting team advancing. The girl, wounded and unable to lift her arms, was quickly seized. One of the men grabbed her by the hair to get a better look at her face. Smirking at her beauty, he called out to his comrades, suggesting they could have some fun with her before taking her to their boss. Before the situation could worsen, Aang lunged forward and delivered a brutal kick to the man's face. Though he had hoped to stay uninvolved, it was clear now, the Silver Wolf hunting team were nothing more than thugs. Standing between them and the girl, Aang warned the others. They had one chance to leave before he made them regret staying. Ignoring his warning, another man pointed his gun at Aang. But with a swift movement, Aang seized the weapon with one hand, unleashing a surge of strength that flung the man backward. Stunned, the attacker gasped, asking whether Aang was even human or something else entirely. Without hesitation, Aang crushed the gun in his hand. His cold reply came like a thunderclap. Whether human or demon, it no longer matters to you. At that moment, a loud, chilling scream echoed through the air. Aang reassured the girl not to worry, mentioning that he possessed healing abilities. Amazed to find her wounds completely mended, the girl gratefully thanked him. She then remarked that she had heard only quadruple core warriors could trigger unique phenomena and easily wield such abilities. Curious, she asked if Aang was a quintuple core warrior. However, Aang simply smiled and replied that he was a double-finned core warrior, with abilities that were just a little more unusual than most. The girl thanked him again and apologized for having pointed a gun at him earlier. Aang graciously accepted her apology, then asked if she knew the way to the nearest city. The girl nodded, saying she did, but insisted she wanted Aang to bring her along as well. Aang hesitated, pointing out that they had only just met and didn't even know each other's names yet. He then asked why she was so eager to head to the city. The girl explained that the nearest settlement was Sanwai Town, a tiny rank C city, but it had recently been seized by the Silver Wolf hunting team. A few days earlier, her own group, the branded gun hunting team, had attempted to reclaim the town but failed. Although they initially had a real chance of victory, they hadn't realized that the Silver Wolf's leader had recently broken through to become a triple core warrior, drastically boosting his strength. She added that if helping to free the city wouldn't interfere with Aang's plans, she would be willing to assist him in any way she could. The girl further explained that the Silver Wolf's true motive for occupying Sanwai Town was to seize its energy crystal. Hearing that the Silver Wolf dared to lay claim to a city's energy source ignited Aang's anger. Without hesitation, he told the girl to lead the way, declaring that either reason alone, the capture of the town or the theft of its crystal, was more than enough to enrage him. Aang journeyed alongside the girl toward Sanwai Town. Upon reaching the outskirts, they discreetly concealed their vehicle nearby. As Aang spoke with her, a group of demons suddenly emerged from behind, but he swiftly neutralized them with ease, his abilities overwhelming their assault. After bringing the creatures to the ground, Aang remarked that killing them would only attract more with the stench of blood and death. He then turned to the girl and said it was time to move. She nodded, her expression bright with hope. In her mind, she marveled at Aang's strength, reassured that hope still remained. While hiding in a nearby bush, Aang grew uneasy. There were no guards patrolling the town, and the gates stood eerily wide open. Moments later, they spotted a man running out while carrying a child. Before he could escape, something, or someone, grabbed him and violently slammed his head into the ground. The girl, enraged, instinctively raised her gun, but Aang stopped her, warning that firing would reveal their presence. Suddenly, a massive hand reached through the doorway and dragged both the man and child back inside. Witnessing this, Aang and the girl immediately realized a powerful demon had taken over the town. Aang's thoughts raced. If a demon was indeed controlling the area, their original plan was no longer viable. They would have to rescue the townspeople one by one. Without hesitation, Aang surged forward toward the entrance, catching their enemies off guard. The girl followed quickly, stunned to see him effortlessly subdue two men from the notorious Silver Wolf hunting team. As she approached their fallen bodies, she noticed something disturbing. Their skin looked decayed, like they had been dead for days. She urgently warned Aang. Everyone inside the town might be members of the Silver Wolf team. But to her shock, Aang continued to cut down the enemies without hesitation. Upon closer inspection, he realized these weren't living opponents. They were corpses, reanimated and controlled by a demon with a sinister power. With this revelation, Aang's expression hardened. Mercy was no longer an option. He would destroy them all. While observing one of the corpses, Aang noticed a black, string-like aura attached to its head. Believing that he could track the demon through these auras, he informed the girl that he would search the city to see if any others were still alive. Without delay, he quickly followed the trail of the dark string, which led him to a castle. Aang kicked open the door and was met with a grim sight, the corpses of a father and his son. Realization struck him, he was too late. At the front of the hall stood the demon, who declared that everything in the city, whether dead or alive, belonged to her. She then invited Aang inside, expressing her curiosity to meet her latest visitor. The demon was a triple-finned demon, possessing the abilities of a purple core. Behind her, Aang spotted 3 energy crystals and began to wonder what her intentions were with them. Noticing the expression on Aang's face, the demon asked whether he was human or demon. Aang slowly approached and replied that, in the presence of a corpse-controlling demon, even the Silver Wolf team leader, who had already ascended to a triple-core warrior, likely stood no chance. Upon hearing Aang mention the triple-core warrior, the demon abruptly summoned the warrior's corpse and commanded it to attack. Aang was forced backward, and from the shadows, he saw multiple warrior corpses begin to emerge. The demon had summoned them all to greet her guest. As he looked around, Aang realized with horror that these were not only the remains of the Silver Wolf hunting team, but of every warrior in the city. With a chilling laugh, the demon welcomed Aang to the party. The army of corpses charged toward Aang as he contemplated the threat before him, a triple-finned demon, while he remained in his double-finned form. If this demon had been a typical triple-finned type, the battle would have been far more dangerous. Fortunately, it was a purple-core demon, more adept at manipulating illusions and steering the flow of battle than engaging in direct combat. Summoning his fire element, Aang ignited his fists and unleashed a blaze, incinerating the corpses around him. Impressed by the result, the demon remarked that Aang did not seem like an ordinary human and invited him to fight. Aang replied that the decision had already been made. He had burned all the corpses, the demon's precious tools for battle. Enraged, the demon cursed his actions, lamenting how difficult those treasures had been to collect. Wasting no time, Aang leapt toward the demon, knowing that without bodies to command, her combat strength had been significantly weakened. Just as he was about to strike and destroy her core, the corpse of the child suddenly appeared, shielding it. Aang froze, hesitation flickering across his face. Seizing the opportunity, the demon launched a counterattack, landing a blow to Aang's abdomen. Fortunately, he managed to soften the impact by activating his water elemental powers, avoiding a serious injury. With a twisted smile, the demon revealed that she wasn't only skilled in manipulation, she also wielded the sharp and deadly gold element. Aang was caught off guard by this revelation, surprised to learn of her dual abilities. Aang suffered a deep injury and needed to heal the wound on his abdomen using his wood element healing ability. The demon, observing his condition, stated that she would have to take a risk in order to destroy him. She then commanded her corpse to bring an item that had been extremely difficult for her to obtain. Once the item was in her hands, the demon opened her mouth and began to slowly consume it. Although Aang didn't know what it was, he instinctively sensed that allowing her to absorb it would be dangerous. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he rushed forward without fully healing, determined to interrupt her. However, he was too late. The demon succeeded in consuming the item, and Aang was hurled backward by a surge of powerful energy. Shocked, Aang wondered where the demon had acquired such an intense burst of power. Could she really be extracting energy directly from the crystal? He found it hard to believe, as the energy stored in energy crystals was chaotic, refined and compressed by humans. If absorbed directly, that energy should cause any body to explode. It was a theory Aang had confirmed to be true in his previous life. He then noticed that while the energy within the demon's body was still raging, it had stabilized at a certain threshold. Could it be due to the mysterious substance she consumed earlier? Moments later, the demon began to evolve. Aang was stunned. It had used the energy within the crystal to forcibly trigger evolution. The transformation was successful. The demon had evolved into a quadruple-finned demon. Realizing this, Aang couldn't help but think he was in serious trouble. The demon summoned several small circular objects and positioned them around Aang. Using these objects, she launched a barrage of sharpened gold wind nail attacks. To defend himself, Aang conjured a wooden shield and hid inside it. However, the demon pierced through his defense with her sharp, golden foot, slamming Aang to the ground. Paralyzed by the impact, Aang couldn't move. Seizing the opportunity, the demon pinned his arm to the ground with her sharpened foot. She then morphed her hand into a blade, preparing to deliver the final blow. But just before the blade could reach him, the demon's movement abruptly stopped. Without warning, multiple black holes emerged in the air, twisting the space around her. Aang watched in shock as another demon stepped out from one of the black holes and grabbed the quadruple-finned demon by the head. "You can't be allowed to interfere with our plans," the new demon said coldly. With a terrifying ability, the newcomer compressed the quadruple-finned demon's body, ultimately killing her. As the corpse collapsed, its purple core was left behind, which the second demon casually took into her possession. Gazing at Aang with disdain, she muttered, "Humans like you can never be trusted." Aang was shocked to see an octuple-finned demon appear, and he immediately felt an overwhelming pressure. It was just like the red being that resided inside his body. Then it hit him. This was the same octuple-finned demon he had seen in his past life. The demon told Aang that if she left things as they were, they'd never know when the crimson-finned king would awaken. She mocked him, saying that for someone who was supposed to be the strongest among all humans, he was evolving far too slowly. Without warning, she used her ability to levitate Aang and forcefully embedded the purple core into his chest, attempting to evolve him directly into a quadruple-finned demon. Aang was stunned. She had just stuffed the quadruple-finned demon's demonic core straight into his chest. He knew that if he skipped over the triple-finned evolution stage, his body would explode. The power inside the quadruple-finned core was far too much for him to handle. The octuple-finned demon found Aang's reaction pathetic and questioned whether he was truly that weak. Aang, grimacing in pain, replied that his body wouldn't be able to withstand the energy and begged her to find another way to help him. In response, she cast an octagon spatial lock, sealing the space around him, and shouted, calling him a trash human, and demanding that he survive this ordeal. Aang could only grit his teeth, enduring the excruciating pain. Suddenly, the demon residing within his body awakened, irritated that his rest had been disturbed. Aang's body began to regenerate, his form shifting, transforming, until he emerged as the crimson-finned king demon. With newfound power, he broke free from the octagon spatial lock. The crimson-finned king told the obsidian-finned king that she shouldn't have interfered with the human's evolution. However, the obsidian-finned king, feeling excited, suddenly leapt toward him and embraced him, expressing her joy at his long-awaited appearance. It had been a long time since they last saw each other. She shared that she had been quietly observing the human from the shadows, but this time, his powers were no match for the newly evolved quadruple-finned demon. The crimson-finned king explained that his current form must undergo countless tribulations to be properly refined. Unlike their own kind, human bodies are frail, yet full of untapped potential. He clarified that Aang had only absorbed enough energy to evolve into a double-finned state, but the obsidian-finned king had forced him to skip a stage, pushing him into the next phase of evolution prematurely. The human's body wasn't even capable of withstanding the strain of absorbing energy from a quadruple-finned core. However, the energy that leaked from the core was enough to temporarily awaken the crimson-finned king from his deep slumber. He then warned the obsidian-finned king never to interfere in this human's evolution again. The process must unfold gradually, step by step, for only then can he become the perfect vessel. The obsidian-finned king responded that she would listen to whatever the crimson-finned king says. She then shared that during the time he pretended to be dead, the other four kings reached a stalemate, none of them willing to make the first move, despite harboring hidden ambitions. As he had predicted, They maintained a delicate equilibrium, constantly countering one another. The Crimson-Finned King noted that the other kings had once joined forces out of fear to fight against him. Yet even in his absence, their deep-rooted paranoia kept them in check. It seemed they were incapable of trusting one another, their old habits too deeply ingrained. Perhaps they had even forgotten the original purpose that once united them. Crimson then asked Obsidian how she had been, and whether the other kings were suspicious of her. Obsidian replied that even if they were, they likely lacked the time and energy to investigate what truly happened back then. She reassured him that she was fine, and told him not to worry about her. Obsidian gently touched Crimson's chest and expressed that all she wanted was to welcome the strongest version of him safely back home. Crimson smiled and assured her that she would, he was only a step away. He added that he had forcibly evolved Aang's body into the quadruple-finned state, but the boy still needed time to adjust and stabilize the immense power now within him. Crimson then reminded Obsidian not to interfere with the human any further. To maintain their cover, it was crucial to keep a low profile so that their greater plans wouldn't be compromised. As the two demon kings walked together, the girl accompanying Aang looked on in shock, wondering how beings like octuple-finned demons could exist. At that moment, the Crimson-Finned King made a sudden move, and a splash of blood followed. Meanwhile, Aang felt as though he were drowning, the girl's voice echoing in his ears, whispering that he was a demon too. When Aang regained consciousness, he saw the girl lying in front of him, her body covered in wounds and drenched in blood. Horrified, he looked down at his hands, trembling as the thought struck him, "Did I do this?" His entire body shook, and then he let out a furious roar. A powerful aura burst from within him, and in that moment, Aang transformed, his body evolving fully into the quadruple-finned form. Moving forward, Aang set the girl's body ablaze, along with the other corpses scattered throughout the small city. His heart weighed heavily with guilt. In his mind, he could never forgive himself for what had happened. He believed it was all his fault, for failing to suppress the demon's energy within him. Even though he had achieved the strength of a quadruple-finned form, he no longer cared to test the limits of his newfound power. There were more pressing concerns. His thoughts were a mess, and he needed time to reorganize them. That octuple-finned female demon, her terrifying ability still haunted his memory. What were these demons truly planning? And then there was the triple-finned demon that had used some strange equipment to force its evolution into a quadruple-finned state. Aang suspected that such advanced technology could only come from a top-tier city, perhaps even the city of Breaking Dawn. Regardless, he knew one thing. He needed to find a large town as soon as possible and inform leader Joel that he was still alive. He also worried about Lu and the rest of the team. Had they escaped the tunnel safely? Had they already made it to the city? Based on the information he had, continuing in this direction would eventually lead him to an A-rank city known as Pacadia. Meanwhile, the 4 other team members and Ji Yaotong have safely reached the A-rank city called Brian. The quintuple-finned core warrior and battle instructor, Kurt, explained that they could not dispatch any soldiers for a rescue mission, as they had just received news that the B-rank city of Pether had been overrun by a high-level demonic wave and completely destroyed. He speculated that the comrade named Aang, whom they had been discussing, was likely among the casualties. However, Ji Yaotong argued that Aang possessed a unique talent, and there was still a chance he had survived. The lieutenant replied that even in the A-rank city of Brian, there was no shortage of young warriors with extraordinary abilities, but despite their talents, none had managed to survive a high-level demonic wave. Ji Yaotong was unable to respond and felt a wave of disappointment. The lieutenant then added that in this apocalyptic world, no human life should be abandoned. While it was impossible to send reinforcements directly, he offered to instruct returning scouting warriors to check the ruins of Pether for any possible survivors. Ji Yaotong's face lit up with hope, and he thanked the lieutenant sincerely. The lieutenant said that he was a busy man and would take his leave, advising the visitors to make themselves at home. He also wondered whether the high-ranked demonic wave in Pether City would affect the upcoming demon hunting competition in the city of the Breaking Dawn. Ji Yaotong replied that he had heard about the competition as well, that it was going to be held soon. However, he pointed out that Helios City was only a C-rank city. The lieutenant responded that it didn't matter. If they were interested, they could stay for a few days to learn more about it. The only S-rank city, the City of the Breaking Dawn, would be hosting the demon hunting competition. The requirement for participation was for a city to be ranked at least B rank. Although Helios City didn't meet the criteria, The lieutenant added that the 3 young warriors behind Ji Yaotong might be eligible to participate in the future. Before the lieutenant exited the room, Ji Yaotong and his team bowed and thanked him for his kindness.